Thank these three young sisters for presenting the mood and tempo for the service today and directing our minds and our thoughts in preparation for the words of the Lord. Some of you may be aware of an article that appeared some time ago in some journal or other about a group of young men who were taken in a police state in a country that was the most powerful country in the world. And these men were taken by the military and brought before the courts. Because of the surveillance of the country, it was believed that they were conducting themselves in a way that was considered to be inappropriate and not as the actual government of that country would have wanted. And they were threatened with the ultimate sanction of capital punishment. And in spite of this hanging over them, they did not change their minds. They were perceived to be part of some bizarre cult. How is it that these three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were able to hold themselves up against the ultimate deterrent and stand up for what they believe? What do they have that we do not possess today, or most of us? The title of the sermon is Sheep in Wolves' Clothing, or the Government's Children, or the Broken Compass. Let's pray. Eternal Father, open our minds and cover me and speak through me in Jesus' name. My father is a retired teacher, and when he retired from his last job as a supply teacher in Newark, New Jersey, that last week, one of the days, the last week in December of the year he retired, there were some young men sitting at the back of his class, and they were talking, and they were drinking Pepsi Cola and eating crisps. And he called across and asked them to put them away. Within seconds, one of the bottles flew across the class, hit my dad right between his eyes, and he had to have plastic surgery. The police were called, and the perpetrators were gathered up. But this was on the last day of his working life as a teacher. I remember speaking to a young teacher, a young girl, quite pretty she was. She said to me, and that's in this country, a young boy, 14-year-old boy, came up to her and said, "Hey, miss, what are you going to do if I want to put my hand up your skirt?" Forced her up against the wall. She complained to the head teacher. This happened on a Friday. She wanted support from the head teacher so that this child would be disciplined and removed from the class. On a Monday, the boy was back in the class and nothing had happened. Nothing at all. What kind of messages are we sending to our young people? What about in the law, outside of the schools? Things have changed over the years. Within the schools, there's no boundaries. And teachers will tell you, their hands are tied. You can't lay your hands on a child. They're having to rearrange the law today to say that certain members of the school will now be allowed to come and lay their hands on a child and remove them. But you have to be careful. Corporal punishment was done away with in 1987 in state schools. But in the higher schools, in the public schools, and some of the top schools, where the so-called ruling classes are educated, they still have corporal punishment because they understand something, that young children, particularly young boys, need boundaries. They definitely need to know. They need ultimate deterrence. But you are just the followers, the regular members of society. You don't need any discipline. Let you carry on, because we shall rule over you. And even in the wider society, here in Wolverhampton, a man was sitting in his van. He sent his 12-year-old daughter across the road with some money to get some fish and chips from the fish and chip shop. Two youths saw her, grabbed her, pushed her to the ground, took the money. He got out of the car, checked his daughter, put her in the chip shop, asked them to look after. He ran down the road, got back into his van and ran down these boys. They split. He managed to get one of them. And he thought, what would you think of as a father as you see someone do this to your child? He said, no, I'm not going to do what I want to do here. But he grabbed the boy, forced him into the car, into the van, went back to the chip shop, called the police. And he was done with the kidnapping of a mind. What message are we sending to the society? What are we saying to the young people today? What are we telling them? Young people today, even here in Wolverhampton, the area of Wolverhampton, the town is divided up into postcodes. And if your young son is unfortunate enough to walk around in a certain area, he may find himself attacked or killed or stabbed, as I even know a sister in this very audience who's experienced that with a relative of hers. Mothers are frightened when their young men leave the house. When are they going to come back safely? In this town, I've spoken to bouncers and doormen who say they're going to get out of the business because it's dangerous. Over at what was called the Oceana before, you remember 2 bouncers, they threw out a young lad full of acne, young teenager. He came back the night, an hour later, and kneecapped both of these bouncers. Because young men today say they don't care whether you're big and strong and muscular, or whether you can do karate, whether you're a black belt, because no amount of muscle can stop a bullet or a knife. So when we were young, we watched, maybe our heroes, we watched Bruce Lee, because he was a martial artist. But today they look at Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis hasn't got muscle. Bruce Willis is no Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's no Sylvester Stallone. But what does he have? He has the gun. He has the gun, and so it doesn't matter. And so the young men today are fearless, out on the streets. Bus going by, 5:59 to New Cross Hospital. Gang of guys get on the bus and hold the bus hostage, cause all the passengers to empty their purses, their wallets, and their plastic cards. In New Cross Hospital, a gang comes there. Half of the gang stand outside and block the hospital so no public can get in. Then the others went into the waiting area and tried to kill one young man who was already injured there because of them. I was doing some lectures a few months ago in town to these Muslim boys. I remember one of the boys, very vociferous, asking questions all the time and everything, very chatty and everything. I was telling them at the other church there that someone was killed in Whitmarines and stabbed and died. Only to find out later that it was this lad in the class there. The world is changing. The world is changing, and it's not happening by chance. We're being led off in a certain direction. The laws are changing. The educational establishment, not just the young children's educational establishment, but if your children go on to further education, there they can be radicalized and they can become antisocial and want to kill themselves to blow up certain areas where there are innocent people. Or they can be told that homosexuality is acceptable and is okay. And so same-sex relationships become all right. And so you find parents who sent their young children off to university have no idea of what's going on at that university and the influences on the minds of the young people. The world is changing. This was a so-called Christian country. And now 12% of the population